Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
But now it's time for our big interview. I'm delighted to be joined by Jeremy Corbyn. Good to see you again. How are you?
Thank you. Fine.
So we had this shocking event in Parliament, Khaled Massoud killing 4 people. It now looks as though he was not formally connected to any terrorist organisation, that he was a bit of a loner in that sense. Do you see him as a terrorist or as a dangerous, perhaps mentally ill criminal?
Well, it was clearly an act of terror, what he did. We're only beginning to piece together the stories of his life, but clearly he's somebody that had some dangerous ideas and dangerous opinions. Somewhere along the line he had developed that, and I think one has to look into his life, what he experienced in prison, what happened to him there, where he got these terrible ideas from, and how he made the attack. And fortunately he wasn't accompanied by others, but nevertheless there's been the most catastrophic loss of life and hurt as a result of it.
Did the security services let us down, therefore, in your view?
Well, it'd be hard to know how they could have known much more about him, because he was apparently the subject of peripheral investigations about 6 years ago. He didn't appear to be connected to any other group, therefore wasn't likely to be part of any wider conspiracy at that stage, and we had this terrible event. So in that sense he was a loner, but I think it's a bit dangerous to get too far into speculation about him and his life at this stage. I think there's an awful lot more that needs to be done.
But are there implications, for example, in terms of the powers the security services should have? I mean, for example, Amber Rudd has just said on the BBC that she's very concerned that these apparently security services have still not been able to find out what this man's last message on the messaging service WhatsApp actually said because of the encryption. Do you think there is an issue about giving more powers to the security services to be able to effectively hack into services like WhatsApp?
They have huge powers of investigation already. There is a question of always balancing the right to know, the need to know, with the right to privacy.
Is the balance right at the moment?
I think it probably is. I've been concerned about giving too much unaccountable power to anybody in our society. So could the security services go to court and make an application? I would have thought they probably could.
Is Parliament secure enough? There's quite a lot of talk about at the moment about making that front gate more secure.
I think Parliament has a huge security presence. I've been in Parliament a very long time, and I've seen the security get stronger and stronger over all those years. But again, I think you have to balance it between an open democratic society and the need to keep people safe. The last thing I would want is to deny the public access to Parliament, deny the right of the public to interact with their elected representatives. Democracy has to be an interactive, open process, and if you cut MPs off, stick them in effectively a secure cordon and deny them any interrelationship with the public, then we all lose. That surely is the message. We are a democracy.
Now, you said the BBC had misinterpreted your views on shoot to kill, that some remarks you made were taken out of context. And in fact, the BBC Trust, I think, upheld your point of view.
They did indeed.
But we've had lots of messages from people saying that you are opposed to shoot to kill. So do you want to just clarify what your position is on this?
The context in which I made the remarks about shoot to kill, which, as you say, the complaint was upheld by the BBC Trust because they were taken completely out of context, was over the 1980s policy in Ireland, where the shoot to kill was obviously wrong. What I did say was that in a wholly defensive situation,
so like the one that we've just been
such as happens on Wednesday, then that is the response.
And that's perfectly, it's a perfectly legitimate, it's the right response.
It was the response that was made at the time. There was no other thing to do at that time.
And you support, therefore, the police behaving...
The police did their best to protect Parliament, and Keith Palmer lost his life trying to protect Parliament, and let's remember that. But there is a question, you quite rightly say, about the question of access to the building and whether or not that could be looked at. Now, I don't think this is the place to look at that. I think there has to be an examination of it.
But just to be clear, sorry, I don't want to, but this does matter to people. Are you saying that it's absolutely right for the police to have, you know, when these situations arise, the power to shoot and kill?
They have the powers they need in a wholly defensive situation, yes. But you've got to be careful that you don't end up with what we had in Ireland in the 1980s. OK, I understand what you're saying now, I think.
Then there's this whole issue of prevention. There is this policy called Prevent that the government has, which is about trying to prevent the indoctrination of potential terrorists in public institutions, for example. What is your current view on that? The government is plainly pressing ahead with Prevent, despite the fact that, for example, even on this programme, a chap called David Anderson, who was in charge of, until recently, policing terror legislation, said that he thought that it was alienating too many in the Muslim community. What is your current position on Prevent?
I think he's very right. I talk to people in the Muslim community, I talk to people in mosques, I talk to people in churches, I talk to people that go to synagogues, all kinds of different faiths and different groups. And I think what Prevent has often done is seen to target the Muslim community, not anybody else, looks to say there's a kind of suspicion over the whole community, and it's actually often counterproductive.
So drop Prevent or reform Prevent? What's your view?
Deal with the issue of far-right extremism within our society, deal with the issue of racism in our society, deal with the issues of discrimination within our society, deal with the issues of the perceptions of stop and search within our society. Above all, be inclusive of people. And what Prevent does is says, well, hang on, let's look only at the Muslim community. There are...
So you're saying scrap and start again, broaden it into something else?
I'm saying broaden it into an agenda of inclusion, an agenda of...
so focus it on more than the Muslim community, is that what you're saying?
Focus it on all communities.
Right, OK. I mean, that does sound like you broadly think it's wrong and they need to start again.
My constituency includes people from all over the world, and all different faiths and lots of different languages spoken. And I was talking to people last night in my constituency in Finsbury Park. They live together, they work together, and it's very much a multicultural community. They think Prevent actually targets one community, not all communities. We want all those young people to feel less alienation and more of a participation in our society. That's what it's about.
In the coming week on Wednesday, we're going to get this historic moment where the Prime Minister starts negotiations for us to leave the European Union by triggering so-called Article 50. Now, Keir Starmer, who's in charge of this area of policy for you, has said that unless she comes back with a deal that effectively replicates our current access to the single market, our current membership of the customs union, Labour will vote against that deal. Why is that?
We're very clear that there has to be unfettered access to the European market. Otherwise, the threat to jobs in this country is absolutely huge. Most of our manufacturing industries have a European sale and European supply chain in them. Car industry is totally integrated across Europe. Airbus totally integrated, Rolls-Royce, many other companies. And if we don't maintain this unfettered access to the European market, then quite clearly those industries are very much at risk, because to open up new markets elsewhere in the world to cover what is around half of British trade straight away is impossible. Therefore, we're looking at a big problem for manufacturing industry. So our fundamental point is about access to the European market.
No, I see that, but pretty much every European leader says it is inconceivable we'll get a deal that's as good as the one we have now. So you're basically committing Labour to voting against Brexit, aren't you?
No, we're not. What we're saying is we respect the result of the referendum, that's clear. We are therefore...
But if you vote against the deal, what does that mean in practice?
Well, we're not at the position of knowing what the deal is yet, so this is a pretty high level of speculation when we're 2 years away from that particular vote. Our basic position is we want to maintain unfettered access to the European market. I have met with Socialist Party leaders from across Europe, made that point to them. Now, they're not all in government, some of them are. They fully understand our position. They fully understand also that they don't want to see Britain heading off in the direction of being some kind of offshore tax haven where we lower corporation tax to the lowest level in order to attract investment in service industries. They don't want us to become that sort of offshore tax haven.
Now, it's going to be a momentous week in another sense. We're going to get the Scottish Parliament voting for a second independence referendum. You've said that if the Scottish Parliament votes in that way, Westminster should not block a second independence referendum. So just to be clear, you oppose the Prime Minister when she says now is not the time?
The Scottish Parliament will make its decision this week on it. I do not think a second referendum in Scotland is a good idea. I think the economic strategy being put forward by the SNP would be pretty disastrous in Scotland. 15 billion gap between what's needed and what is the income in Scotland under existing Scottish government figures. However, if that's what the Scottish Parliament wants, then I think that it would be wrong for Westminster to say to Scotland, well, we gave you this devolution, but sorry, this is where it stops.
So can I if you were Prime Minister now,
I would be saying
would...
pretty firmly to the Scottish Government, is this really a very good idea at this point?
Sure, but if they then decided it was a good idea and they came to you with a parliamentary vote saying, you know, the Scottish Parliament wants a referendum, you would say, OK, you can have one.
The principle of having it, yes, of course, one has to discuss the question of the timing and the date of it.
And when is the right time?
Well, I would have thought during Brexit negotiations is an extremely bad idea because clearly there needs to be a position put forward where we know what the trade relationship could be in the future and what's on offer, and the Scottish people would also know what's on offer.
That looks like the same position as Theresa May.
No, it's not. It's never the same position as Theresa May.
OK, well, we'll come back to you and pick up with that in just a second. But Allegra has got some gripping information about you.
That sounds so sarcastic, Robert. It has been noted in recent weeks that Jeremy Corbyn's career is starting to resemble one of his heroes, Arsene Wenger. So I have looked at the evidence for you all. Let's canter through it, OK? Both men, 67. Both men under pressure to stand down. To be fair to each, they have had their successes in the past. Wenger has had won a massive 9 major trophies in 21 years. That's pretty good. Jeremy Corbyn, smiling at this because he knows what's coming, he has won 2 leadership elections pretty roundly in 18 months. Both, however, are managing pretty unhappy squads. So these are, for Corbyn, MPs like Jamie...
Happy Arsenal one.
Alexis Sanchez, I'm told.
No.
So here we go. Hold on. You think he's happy? Hold on a second. So here we go. So here we have...
arguing about whether Sanchez
I know whether
unhappy,
he's
not
unhappy. No, indeed, exactly. He's focusing on that side, which we'll come on to later. So look, here we have Jamie Reid, Tristram Hunt. They transferred elsewhere. For Wenger, there are rumours. Jeremy Corbyn's disputing them that Alexis Sanchez wants out as well. Now, both bosses, gloriously stubborn, refusing to go despite poor results, I'm sorry. For Wenger, the banners here are starting to come out in the stands, calling for him to go. And, of course, for Corbyn, he has pretty bad poll ratings, by-election defeat in Copeland, and then tweets like this from his own MP who's saying, why did I resign from the shadow cabinet? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Jeremy Corbyn. So, we have an idea for you. How about a job swap? Arsenal manager, you could re-energise the club's membership and perhaps Labour could benefit from a leader with an economics degree and a genuine desire to stay in Europe. Are you up for that?
Arsene Wenger's a wonderful man and he's a great manager and a great guy, and I think we should admire him.
Have you ever discussed a job swap?
No, I've discussed football with Arsene Wenger and I've also discussed literature and poetry with Arsene Wenger.
But
he's a man of great depth.
And politics?
Yeah.
What do you reckon is more stressful, Jeremy, managing Labour or managing Arsenal?
I think probably managing Labour because the options on team selection are much wider. In the case of Arsene Wenger, he's got a squad of, well, it's a pretty big squad. It's probably about 35 or 40 by now, and he's got to choose 11 out of that. We've got a wider squad.
Now, I've got to...
But I do actually really admire Arsene Wenger, and I think you should...
Has he sympathised with you?
He's always graciously polite, and he's a lovely man, and he's also brilliant at inspiring young people on the need to learn languages and understand the rest of the world. And I've seen him absolutely inspirational talking to primary school children in our area.
Now, I've got to interrupt here because, although for me that was the most interesting thing I'm going to hear all day.
Well, you're not joining in the Wenger debate, then?
People know my position on Arsene Wenger.
What is it?
My position on Arsene Wenger is if you should go with honour, is my view. But anyway, let's come back.
What would be the honour? Winning the FA Cup?
That might be a good moment. Now, general elections. There's still a lot of talk about an early general election. Is Labour ready for an early general election?
We are developing our policies, but clearly if an election is called, we can bring all that forward, and we are ready, yes. We have obviously contingency plans within our party structure, within our organisation, and with our funding arrangements.
If Theresa May, under the Fixed Parliament Act, asked for permission from MPs for a general election, would you give her that permission?
I think wouldn't be just us, actually, because it requires two-thirds of all MPs to vote for it.
Yeah.
We would not block it, of course not, because if that's what's on offer, I don't know if that's in her mind or not. She certainly hasn't discussed it with me.
No, we'll have to just wait and see what
maybe she hasn't discussed it with anybody else either.
Unfolds. Now, your deputy, Tom Watson, got very angry a few days ago about what he saw as an attempt by Len McCluskey and Momentum to seize control of the party. Was Watson right about that threat?
Momentum had a very successful one-day conference yesterday in Birmingham. There were 600 or 700 people there. And do you know what they discussed? Campaigning, door-knocking and convincing former UKIP supporters to come over to Labour.
But just to be absolutely clear,
they were participating in the party.
But
Tom...
This idea of an affiliation between Unite and Momentum, what do you think of that?
No, is
it a bad idea?
It's fiction.
But it may be fiction, but is it a bad idea?
Look, Unite are going through a General Secretary election. That's up to Unite. Momentum are recruiting members, are active in the party, and I'm encouraging all Momentum activists to get out on the doorstep as part of the Labour Party all through April during the council elections.
And then very finally, on this great repeal bill, which is coming up, Theresa May is going to be asking for quite sweeping powers, so-called Henry VIII powers, to make decisions without consulting MPs. Will you oppose that?
Yes, because I don't think the record of Henry VIII on promoting democracy, inclusion and participation was a very good one. He was all about essentially dictatorial powers to bypass what was then a very limited parliamentary power. These things survived. The British Constitution is a wondrous thing. Well, they've got to stop. We need total accountability at every stage of this whole Brexit negotiation. I understand there's going to be about 12 ancillary and related bills. We're not going to sit there and hand over powers to this government to override Parliament, override democracy, and just set down a series of diktats of what's going to happen in the future. We'd be failing in our duty as democratically elected parliamentarians if we did that.
Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm going to be thinking all day about Allegra's idea that Jeremy Corbyn should be managing Arsenal.